one reason for associating fireworks with Diwali celebration. The other is a very, very in Christian terms, scriptural reason. In Indian terms, it's a metaphysical reason. So we had in the Hungry Ghost episode, we had talked about Pitripaksh, when the ancestors come down. So Diwali is the time when they go back. So when they go back, what we want to do is show them the way. So that is why we put a lot of light everywhere on the ground, and we also want light up above in the skies. So how do we do that? We do that in the Indian context through Ulka Danam. Ulka Danam was, those days they mostly had saltpeter for this kind of inflammable and explosive thing. So they would take a very long stick, put that on top of the stick, raise the stick very high, or fix the stick very high so that the Ulka Danam, or the the path that was lit, was done in the sky.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the WARC Indian History Podcast. I'm Utkarsh coming to you from Singapore.
Namaskar, Sumedha, coming to you from Geneva.
And this time we have something special. We know what time of year it is. And we also realized that last year we didn't have a Diwali special for some reason. Maybe we were just getting started. So we are going to right that wrong now. And this is going to be our first ever Diwali special.
Yes. Happy Diwali to everyone who's celebrating it, no matter where in the world. Happy Diwali.
So I wanted to ask a few questions actually, since we were doing this. One question that has always been something that I didn't know the answer to, because of course I live in Singapore. And what I've noticed is that Diwali in Singapore is one day earlier than the, the earlier than what it was in India, or at least what it was in North India, because I understand in South India it is the same as Singapore. So I wanted to ask, why is that? And secondly, Diwali, of course, is massive in India. And of course, I associate Diwali with Ramayana. And I've seen Ramayana not only in India, but there are Ramayans in Malaysia, Ramayans in Indonesia, Thailand. So I wanted to
Absolutely.
understand a little bit about what they are, how potentially they're slightly different. I mean, I can hazard a guess on how they reached there, but any more perspective on these Ramayans would be pretty interesting as well.
Utkarsh, if you've been watching our podcast, you'll remember how they reached there. We've discussed
Yes,
that
yes.
quite a few times. So if you've
Which is
been
why I said I
watching,
could hazard a guess.
so if you've been watching our podcast, then you can guess, and so can all the others who have seen certain earlier episodes of ours, which of course we'll reference now. So that's a very interesting point at which to start, Utkarsh, because it encapsulates the nature of Diwali, which over the millennia has brought within its ambit, the ambit of those 4, 5 very important days, so many strands of Sanatan Dharma worship, so many deities, and so many historical events that we worship. Now, all of us know that Diwali is to welcome Sri Ram and Sita and Lakshman back to Ayodhya after their exile is over, the Vanvas is over. Sri Ram has beaten Ravan. He has freed the abducted Sita, and they are happily back home. And all of Ayodhya goes mad with joy. So, that's how it's the victory of good over evil. It's the festival of lights, of lamps, of decorations, etc. So, this is one very well understood story, at least in North India, and all the places where this version of Diwali has gone. To understand the entire complex, we have to realize that there are 5 days which are important. And these 5 days are the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the waning moon. What is a waning moon? The one which becomes smaller and smaller and disappears. So the day on which it disappears, that is the day on which we actually celebrate Diwali. It is on Amavasya. But the day of, if you leave one day as a gap and go back, then you have Dhanteras. Dhanteras is a day on which we buy metals or gold, and we also celebrate Dhanvantri Divas. Then you have the day that you have been asking about, Utkarsh, which is Narak Chaturdashi. This is the 14th day of the waning moon, that is Chaturdashi. And what does this celebrate? This celebrates the win of Krishna and Satyabhama over Narkasur. So Krishna is the hero of the Mahabharata. Satyabhama is his wife. You may have heard of Rukmini. So Rukmini was his wife, and so was Satyabhama. Now Narkasur was one of those pernicious and very evil asurs who become very powerful, and then they rampage across the three lokas, causing problems to everyone. So someone or the other has to beat these asurs into submission or finish off with them. So Narkasu was one such. He came from the eastern part of India. He's associated with Pragjotishpur, which is now in Assam. And he became very powerful. He could beat anyone he liked in all the three lokas, the Devlok, Bhulok, that is for us, and Patal Lok. So what did he do in Devlok? He went and snatched the earrings of Aditi. Remember who Aditi was? The episode we did on why are cows sacred. I had mentioned Aditi. She is the mother goddess. She is mother to all living beings. So when this disrespect was done to her, she was very upset. And who did she come to? She came to Satyabhama. Now, why did she come to Satyabhama and Krishna, husband and wife? Because Narkasur, like most asurs, had started off by taking a boon from Lord Brahma to safeguard himself. He had asked, after a lot of asceticism and praying to Brahma, when a boon was granted, he had asked that only my mother should be able to kill me. Who was his mother? His mother was Bhumi Devi, that is earth. Now, who was Satyabhama? She was a reincarnation of Bhudevi. So you see that she was the perfect person, the only person to be able to kill Narkasur. So Krishna and Satyabhama launched a war against Narkasur. There was there were days and days of very, very difficult and bloody fighting. In the end, it was an arrow of Satyabhama's which pierced the breast of Narkasur and he died. So that was a time of great excitement and happiness and celebration. And Utkarsh, I don't know if you are aware, but this South Indian Diwali starts with an oil bath at dawn before the sun comes up. Are you aware of that? So that's a very important, very, very important ritual for what we may call this South Indian Diwali. Why is it done? Well, it has a very cute kind of reason behind it, because after Krishna and Satyabhama had these days and days of bloody fighting on the field of war, obviously they needed to clean themselves up. So when they came back from the battle, they cleaned themselves up with an oil bath and a bath, and after that they jumped into the celebrations. So this is exactly what is done. So
I have a
this
question.
is
I have a
yes,
question. So,
yes.
and maybe it's a question is what's in the name, but there are many events of many people defeating many people, good versus evil, Devtas versus Asur, or God versus Asur. So why is this also Diwali? Diwali was linked to the Ramayana, which is Ram, of course, and Ram, Ravan, and his victory. Why is this unrelated story also Diwali, or is it
No,
not an unrelated story?
actually, Utkarsh, this now that you've asked me, this is a time of celebration. This is the
Okay.
time when the harvest, which is the Kharif harvest, the one which is planted during monsoon, actually
Hmm.
is being cut, and it's a time of happiness and celebration. It's a time when it's the new lunar year. Okay,
Hmm.
not the
Hmm,
new
hmm.
solar year, but the new lunar year. So, in fact, there are many, many events, many, many things that we want to remember from our past which are celebrated during this time of happiness and plenty and auspiciousness. So, all the things that are important for India, all the things that are important that we want to remember. Do we want to remember Ram defeating Ravan? Yes. Do we want to remember Krishna and Satyabhama defeating Narkasur? Yes. Do we also want to remember the goddess of prosperity, Lakshmi, at this time? Yes. Therefore, we also worship Lakshmi and Ganesh. So, to think of it as originally connected to the Ramayana with other things getting added is perhaps not the correct lens. The correct lens is that this is a period of auspiciousness. And in this period of auspiciousness, everyone remembers what is important for them. What are the other stories associated with these 2 or 3 days? So there is also on the day, so then we have after this Narak Chaturdashi, we have Diwali. We know Diwali very well. That's the one that I had started with. And after that, the day after Diwali, we have Govardhan Puja. What does Govardhan Puja remember? Govardhan Puja remembers that event from the story of Krishna when he raises the Govardhan Parvat on his little finger because people in his village are no longer worshipping Indra. So Indra is angry and he sends down a deluge to flood the village. Krishna saves everyone by raising the Govardhan Parvat on his finger and everyone shelters under it. So that is Govardhan Puja. During the Govardhan Puja, there is also the worship of Yam and Yami. Yam and Yami are very old Vedic gods. They are foundational gods of the Vedic pantheon. They are brother and sister. So, Yam and Yami, when they are worshipped, the bond between the brother and the sister is also worshipped, as it is also done on the next day, which is called Bhai Dooj. So, you see, it's an amalgamation of so many things that we want to celebrate, we want to remember, we want to reiterate. All important things. And of course, I've mentioned Lakshmi and Ganesh, and don't think that it is a kind of afterthought. This is the worship of Lakshmi. This is the worship of prosperity, of actually riches. Diwali is the worship of riches. So all these things come together and we can, trace them back to very, very, very long ago. Like I said, I'm not much into dating because I think that somehow it doesn't fit into the way in which our Itihas Puran is written. But you can think of thousands of years, add the number as you wish. So there is an Atharv Ved, which people would be familiar with. There is a Parishisht. A Parishisht means an extra. So a lot of the festivals that we celebrate come from this Atharv Parishisht. It gives descriptions. We are not doing a program on Dashera right now. Otherwise, I would have told you how the Atharva Parishisht actually explains how to worship goddess Durga and Vijayadashmi, which is also, it is not just commemorating the victories of our gods and goddesses, but for old time kings, it was a time to sharpen their weapons of war and to, exhibit their military might. So all these things come, and then you have the Skand Puran, which mentions Ulka Danam. What is Ulka Danam? It is fireworks. Ulka is fireworks. So the Skand Puran, which is again 1,000, 2,000, how
So,
many
so
years old?
when we so when we talked about the particular time that Holi was, when we did a Holi episode, it was a particular time of spring.
Yes,
Hence, that is the period of the new year
yes,
linked to
yes,
agricultural cycles and all of that.
yes,
So, beyond the historical reason that victory happened at this particular point in time, right? I'm guessing there's a historical thing. This is the date
yes,
of the calendar. Is
yes,
there any seasonal reason for all of
yes,
these,
yes,
all the values that you mentioned to
yes,
be celebrated
yes,
this time?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. And it is very much dependent on another thing we have discussed at length, which is Jyotish, which is the
Okay.
position of the sun and the moon and the stars.
Hmm.
So the sun
Hmm.
and the moon are aligned at this time. The lunar new year is starting. This is a period of auspiciousness as per our own Jyotish calculations. So the historical things get attached to things which are to periods which are auspicious, and perhaps the war would have ended on this very auspicious note. About the historical bits, well, we cannot say anything with exact certainty, but it is
Hmm.
understood that the war ended on Vijayadashmi on Dashera, and then it took Sri Ram about 3 weeks to come back to Ayodhya. And when he came back
Hmm.
to Ayodhya, then you had this festival of lights to welcome him. But your question is a very good one, and everyone who's listening, you must note this, that this is a very auspicious period. This is a time when all worship and prayers will lead to granting of wishes, will lead to happiness, well-being, and spiritual awakening. So this is a good time. And
So just to go back on that, just to understand, and of course, I'm always trying to find a way to connect it to the understandings of a modern year, right? So that's what I'm going to ask. So, like for example, we were talking about Jyotish, and what we said was the whole presumption here is that consciousness, and we'll talk about that in the future episode, is
yes.
something fundamental and it is affected by actions, right? Versus a Western approach where the fundamental thing is matter and consciousness is emergent. So I can at least understand then what is going on here. So going back to what you were saying, that this is an auspicious period where your prayers are more likely to get answered. What is the what is the connection that you can give me? Is it that you can help me and put
So,
this? I don't want to say the word. Yeah.
the sun and the moon are aligned.
Okay.
That's the most important thing. And it's the beginning of the lunar new year. So
Okay.
this is why when we look at the whole situation of the heavens, as we had tried to see during that
Hmm.
Jyotish
Hmm.
episode. So what we
Hmm.
will see is that the heavenly bodies, especially the sun and the moon, which are at the center of all our Jyotish calculations, are aligned with each
Hmm.
other. They are
Hmm.
in the most, what can I say? They come together and they
Hmm.
create greater strength for all the auspicious for the whole period to become very very auspicious and to help in
Hmm.
attaining all kinds of goals, whether they be spiritual, material, or
Hmm.
what have you. So
Okay.
it
So
is the
it's
astronomical calculations
yeah.
on
So
top of
basically,
which
this
so
is
many historical events are placed.
so yeah. It's an extension of our Jyotish episode then, and I mean, of course, those who haven't checked it out, I recommend checking it out. But just in case you haven't checked it out yet, what the way I took it away is essentially from a very very modern lens how we look at knowledge. We assume that the most fundamental thing is matter and consciousness happens to happen somewhere here and there in some intelligent people, intelligent organisms, right? That's kind of our basic assumption. Mystery of consciousness is of course a big thing that no one has solved yet. What we are saying is, for the Indian belief system, consciousness is not something that randomly emerges from matter when a system becomes intelligent enough or whatever, or complex enough. Consciousness is something that is more fundamental, which we will talk about in a future episode. And what we are saying is consciousness is affected by certain things, actions, and including the positions of the heavenly bodies
Yes.
such as planets.
Yes.
And
And I
what you
will
are saying here,
also
yeah,
just
yeah,
interrupt you to remind our listeners that we had talked of this being an observational conclusion.
yes,
The
yes,
fact that heavenly bodies affect us was something that was observed over millennia and is recorded in certain Jyotish compositions. So it was something which was observed and then
yeah.
conclusions were drawn. And it's in that sense, it is data based.
Exactly. Correct. You exactly said what. Yeah, exactly that. So this hypothesis of consciousness being affected by heavenly bodies was validated through data collection over a period of
Yes.
time,
Yes.
right? And leading to
Correct.
whatever are the basic principles that are being used in Jyotish.
Hmm.
And what you're saying is, per those principles, this particular time period is
Yes.
considered to be useful for achieving the objectives that you may have. That's essentially
Yes.
what you're saying. Okay, I
Yes.
got it.
And also, Utkarsh, again, um, let me say something else also, a little
Yeah.
tangential, but still. So there are two such periods. One is in the
Okay.
spring, around which we have Holi and Vasantotsav, etc., etc. And the next is this time in
Hmm.
autumn, around October, November. Again, we have a whole plethora of festivals at this time. We'll finish with Diwali, then we'll have Chhat, in the south we'll have Kartika Deepam. So there are these periods which are based on astronomical Jyotish calculations. And in
Hmm.
that period are also certain other auspicious things. For example, cutting off the harvest. And obviously, in earlier times, that means you're set for the next year. You have enough food, you have enough to tide you over till the next harvest. So that's a question. That's a very important question, which is resolved. So you're happy. So you see, astronomical calculations, the natural cycle of crops, also has a role to play in the way and time in which we celebrate our festivals. And I think, Utkarsh, you've made a very, very important point. Our festivals are based on natural cycles at every level. The astronomical level, that is, the three loks, Devlok, Bhulok, and Patal Lok. So they are based on natural cycles at every level. So thank you for making that point.
Yeah, it was for my understanding. I guess I basically try to, I say, employ not a Western ear, but a very Western sympathetic ear, just given the way I am, to
Don't
just try
call
to help
yourself,
this
don't call yourself a Western here. You're nowhere near
sympathetic,
that.
Western sympathetic. I am fairly Western sympathetic, I'll say that. But anyways, let's go ahead. Let's not make this about me.
So, in sum, the way in which Diwali is celebrated is sometimes different for different people, but it's all a question of celebration. So, whether we are celebrating the defeat of Narakasur, whether we are celebrating the defeat of Ravan, whether we are praying to Goddess Kali or whether we are praying to Goddess Lakshmi, it is in the same auspicious period. And there is one thing which I did not mention because we got a little deflected. The day after Govardhan Puja, in which we also do this yummy worship, and the day after that is Bhai Dooj. But on the day of Govardhan Puja in the south, there is something which is called Padwa. And what is that Padwa? There is a story about King Bali. King Bali of the south of India, he was supposed to be from Kerala. He was a great, wise, and wonderful king. And his greatness became such that his fame spread through the three lokas. And obviously, the gods are a very insecure lot. So they wanted him to be controlled in some way. So who will they send but our troubleshooter, Lord Vishnu? So Lord Vishnu appears there in the Vaman avatar, which means he's a small little boy, short. Vaman is short, and he appears there. And King Bali he is like Danveer Karn. If someone asks him for something, then he has to give that thing to him. So uh, Vaman asks for 3 steps of land, and he's such a tiny fellow that his 3 steps would have been almost nothing. But then he grows so large that all of the worlds are encompassed in 2 of his steps. And for the third step, King Bali, gives his own head that you can put your feet on my head. So that is why, King Bali is not one of your average obnoxious asurs. He is one of the most well remembered, most affectionately remembered, greatest and compassionate kings in the Indian pantheon. So that day, Padwa, there is also this remembrance of Bali. So again, I would like to reiterate there's a whole basket of things that we revere, whole basket of things which are auspicious. And in here, I think, lies the genius of Sanatan Dharma or Hinduism. Everyone celebrates it according to what they like, according to what they want to celebrate, worship, and remember. So, therefore, this whole thing is a very harmonious way in which diverse traditions are integrated. And I think
I,
Hinduism has understood integration.
yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. So my understanding is that this King Bali story is related to Onam, correct, in Kerala.
Hmm.
The reason I note this is because I just gone to Kerala for a wedding, as you may remember, a couple of weeks ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
and I got to have sadhya, and then my
Ah.
friend whose house I had it in, and who also happens to be Muslim, by the way, yet we had sadhya in his house, who told me the story. So that was a very interesting experience.
Yes, and I will, when we discuss the Ramayana and we discuss the Hikayat Sri Ram, then you will have a similar experience.
Hmm. Anyways, yeah, go ahead.
So, this is as far as Diwali celebrations are, you know, the stories behind them. And how do we do it? We do it, through the ways of celebrating are more or less the same across India or wherever else they are celebrated. The ways of celebrating are the same. Homes and houses are cleaned. Remember, this cleaning is a part of every festival. For Holi, we had the Holika the day before Diwali. So everything that you wanted to, any rubbish that you wanted to burn, it's all put together in a Holika and burnt. So what happens? It's cleaning your house and home and your surroundings. So the same thing happens for Diwali. After that, lights, lamps, diyas, and kolams or rangolis. Do you know what that is, Utkarsh? Kolam or rangoli? So a rangoli is a,
I know what it is, but I've stopped talking about the significance or the reasons. I don't know the
but
reasons.
Utkarsh, the kolam or the rangoli is one of the most fascinating things in the
Hmm.
Indian pantheon of fascinating things. And we must do a special episode on it because in its designs, the most
Hmm.
esoteric and toughest ideas, metaphysical ideas of Hinduism are captured in its design. But I
Okay,
will
that's
not tell
interesting.
you, yes, I will not tell you how now because it's too complicated, but we must do it
Hmm.
once. So a
Okay.
rangoli is made from different colors. They are geometric designs or just pleasing designs of flowers,
Hmm. Hmm.
fruits, birds, etc. They are made on the ground. A kolam is the same. It's a little different in that it is made of rice flour. So it's white. So in the south, it's kolam. In the north, it's rangoli. And Utkarsh, do you remember how I had last time we had discussed, or I think it was in one of my conversations, that all our practices are very, very eco-friendly. So you should ask me why rice flour and why is it made in front of the house?
So that the cow can eat it,
Birds.
birds can
Birds.
eat it, someone can
Yeah.
eat it,
Yes.
basically.
Yes. Yes. So it's for birds. They come and
Hmm.
peck at it and they get their nourishment. And these columns, the normal ones, not the Diwali ones, are made
Hmm.
every day,
Hmm.
every morning. So
Hmm.
you see
Hmm.
how beautiful a way it is to engage with the natural world around you. So for
Hmm. Hmm.
Diwali, columns are made, rangolis are made, and the important thing, the contentious thing in India nowadays, fireworks are let off. Now, why do we need fireworks? Of course, it could be. Utkarsh, it seems to me I'm asking the questions and I'm answering them myself. Do you
No,
have
I
a
was going.
question?
I was going to answer your question. Why do we need fireworks? Because they're fun.
Yes.
Or let me put it this
Yes.
way: I think celebrating with light and sound is it's a kind of thing that you don't really do every day. So I feel like that's kind of if you want to really mark a community celebration. I think not only in India, like even here when we have National Day here in Singapore, we have fireworks as
Yes.
an example, right? So I'm thinking that, and I'm guessing for us, obviously the reasons would be going back much further back in
Yes.
time, which
Yes.
probably you can share about.
Yeah. So, your point about light and sound and celebration going together is a very pertinent one. Swiss National Day, which happens in the first week of August, there are fireworks across the city. But there's a spoiler. There's a Green Party which keeps insisting, don't do them, don't do them. So the
Hmm.
large Geneva Canton celebrations have been cancelled because of this Green Party. Now there are
Hmm.
smaller ones. And earlier we could also buy fireworks in Geneva during that time and let them off. So now the Green Party doesn't let us. I think they're terrible spoilers because you can always control fireworks to make them a little environmentally friendly. There's no need to ban them, which is happening in India too. And I completely disapprove of that. Certainly, if there are some environmental ill effects, we have to deal with them. So we should not have
But
fireworks which are.
I have a question on that. It's
Hmm.
getting tangential, but it's pertinent to the point that you're making. We were looking at the Visarjan when we were in Ranchi, and you were telling me that tradition now the idols are made from, sorry, the uh,
Murtis.
deities are made, huh?
Murti.
Sorry,
Murti.
murtis. Yes,
Never call
let
them
me use the
idols.
right.
That's what Christians call them.
I know
False
this is why
idols.
I. So, anyways, the murtis are made from plaster of Paris,
Or painted with
right? So
toxic paints.
painted with whatever toxic paints, but traditionally they were made from clay or
Hmm.
mitti or earth or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they were not supposed to be eco unfriendly. Is
Hmm.
something similar the case with fireworks?
Hmm. The thing is, Utkarsh, a little bit of history, just a tiny bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So, one reason to celebrate, one reason for associating fireworks with Diwali is celebration. The other is a very, very in Christian terms, scriptural reason. In Indian terms, it's a metaphysical reason. So we had in the Hungry Ghost episode, we had talked about Pitripaksh, when the ancestors come down. So Diwali is the time when they go back. So when they go back, what we want to do is show them the way. So that is why we put a lot of light everywhere on the ground, and we also want light up above in the skies. So how do we do that? We do that in the Indian context through Ulka Danam. Ulka Danam was, those days they mostly had saltpeter for this kind of inflammable and explosive thing. So they would take a very long stick, put that on top of the stick, raise the stick very high, or fix the stick very high so that the ulka danam, or the the path that was lit was done in the sky. So that was saltpeter. As time went by, I just want to reiterate something that if any one of you who's listening listens to some kind of woke nonsense about fireworks whenever part of Diwali, just show them this podcast, okay? They have always been part of Diwali. I mentioned the Skanda Puran, I can mention the Kam Sutra, I can mention so many other compositions are uh, of the past, and paintings. So many of our miniature paintings, medieval paintings show this kind of firework. So that's by way of being something important that I really want to put in here. However, as time went by, you see the simplicity of these fireworks became much more complicated, and you had chemicals and you had noxious gases which come out of these chemicals. So I think that needs to be stopped. And that part is, I mean, I agree with that part. We should be very careful about the kind of fireworks that we let off. There is a category of fireworks called green fireworks, which do not let out noxious gases. So we should use those. But say, for example, the Delhi government has banned fireworks for Diwali. It's a completely wrong move. And the thing is, nobody listens to it. So it's just kind of like stupidity on the part of the government. On the other hand, if they put in some effort to develop green patakas, that would be a much better idea. So then we've had an evolution of the kind of things that have been used for these patakas. And nowadays you have such beautiful ones. Utkarsh, do you remember what we saw just now on the day of the Shera in Ranchi? There were such amazing fireworks. I don't know how green they were. I'm not sure, but they were definitely amazing and fun to watch.
Yeah, and of course we had a pretty good vantage point given where our house is located.
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, it does make sense. I mean, there is, let me put it this way, there is a fundamental communal benefit to these large celebrations and festivals where everybody comes together. And fireworks are a very, very visual, expression of that, visual and audio. So yeah, I think it's
Correct.
important to find some way to do that. If everything turns into you just it's like any other day and you do stuff that you could do
Yeah.
any other time, then it kind of
Yes.
loses its
Yes.
specialness.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm
True.
quite
True.
sympathetic to that argument. Though of course, just eco-friendliness is also very important.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
So why don't we? Did you have something else to say? I wanted to ask a little bit about the Ramayans, which I'm
Hmm.
very curious about. But if you have something else you wanted to share on Diwali, we can go ahead with that first.
No, I've said almost everything I wanted to. Just one little thing which I want to highlight over here, just for something else which is my pet peeve, which is wrong translations. So this whole discussion is going on about how old Diwali is. Did we actually celebrate Diwali or not? So I told you about the Skand Puran and I told you about the Kam Sutra. The Kam Sutra is a strange place where to find Diwali, right? Actually, not. I mean, no, it is the right place because it is the Kam Sutra is for the celebration of the life of what is called a Nagarak. That is a citizen of a very sophisticated citizen of a city. So he celebrates everything. Now, the point I'm making here is the one about translation. So the Kam Sutra mentions Yaksharatri. This Yaksharatri is the night of Diwali, and it is described as, with it's celebrated with lamps, etc., and it's an auspicious and happy occasion. Now, pick up any translation of the Kam Sutra that you want. How do they translate this Yaksharatri? It's called Night of the Goblins. Now, Utkarsh, associating Night of the Goblins directly with Diwali is a bit of a stretch. The average person will not do it because we do know that there is this connection that pitris come down, so maybe you think that the pitris are like goblins and etc etc, but the average person does not think of goblins as in any way connected with Diwali, and yaksha, which is a spirit, is not a goblin. Point I'm making here is be very careful when you read English translations. Be very careful of the way in which they have translated untranslatables because the English equivalent sometimes completely misinforms. And therefore, if I tell someone, no, it's in the Kam Sutra, they'll turn right back and say, no, I've read it. It's not there. Where is it? Because they've read the English version. So this is making a larger point, which I keep making all the time. Learn Sanskrit, read originals, read your mother tongue. Do not rely on translations. This
Is
was
that a hint to me?
totally, yes, learn Hindi. First, learn Hindi well.
Yeah, then we can
And
have
we
more
have
podcasts
to
in Hindi also.
continue our Hindi podcast.
Yeah.
No, so this was my pet peeve. So forgive me
Hmm.
for this kind of complete tangential pet peeve, but it's an important one.
Hmm. 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 No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've talked so much about all the different mistranslations. Take Aryan, for example, that's another one that
Exactly.
we
It's
addressed right
based
at the
on
beginning.
mistranslation. It's completely
Yeah,
based on mistranslation. That's true. That's true.
yeah. Okay, so the Ramayana. So I have a question for you. Well, let me give my context, right? Uh, I've told you this before. Indonesia's national airlines are called Garuda. If you go to into Jakarta, you'll have malls. I'm forgetting the names of the malls. Are were they Ram or Ram? Something to do with Ramayana. I've forgotten the names of the malls. Right? Even if you go to Thailand, you will see Ramayana influences here and there. The shadow puppets that you see in Indonesia telling stories from Ramayana, etc.
Yes.
So my question to you is, uh, I think we know how they spread there. We've talked about it. But my question to you is, have you examined what their stories are, whether they're any different from what we know? And based on that, is there, some interesting, divergences that we can see that would be very interesting for somebody who's just used to the Indian version of Ramayana?
Yes, 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 of course. So, first, the spread of the Ramayana. In short, I would recommend that people go back to our Hungry Ghost episode and Bodhidharma episode, where we have traced the routes through which the India, Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, China connections actually operated. And remember that place called Danhuang? It was a very important place. A lot of the versions of the Chinese Ramayana written in the second century have been found in Danhuang. So, how many Ramayans do you have? So, you have many, many, many. Perhaps it's difficult to count because not only do you have Ramayans in India, you have the story outside India, you have some oral stories that are not written down. So, these are folk stories. So, there are countless number of stories of the Ramayana. Which countries do? have these different stories. So one is, of course, Tibet and China. Then you have Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Malaysia, Java, Indonesia, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Singapore, Japan, Mongolia, Vietnam, even Khotan. You know that the oldest Ramayana outside India was found in Danhuang in China. It's called the Mahavibhas, and it is from the second century. It's a Chinese Ramayana. And this, all of this went through the same routes, those same trade routes. And some scholars have, called it the circulation of knowledge as well as material goods through those trade routes, not just material things, but knowledge, stories, this kind of information was also treated, was also exchanged. Now, for
Okay.
the differences, we are very used to Ram and Sita. So let me tell you the names of some other Ramayans. In China, for example, Ram was called Lomo, Bharat was called Poloto, Lakshman was called Luman, and Sita was called Nangside. So these were the different names in the Chinese Ramayana, which is the Mahavibhas. In the 20th century, I think, somebody translated the Valmiki Ramayana into Chinese, and he was much feted for that. But we have to remember that the Chinese Ramayana goes back to the second century AD, and that is when we found it. The one I want to talk about is the Indonesian Ramayana, the
Hmm.
Kakawin Ramayana. So in the Kakawin Ramayana, for us in the Ramayana per se, Narad, who is just one of the sages, is not very important, or he is marginally important. Of course, the Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana starts with him. When Narad comes and asks, who is the greatest king of all, and then the whole story starts. But in the Kakawin Ramayana, becomes a very important figure, and he has two sidekicks. And what do these three do? They give a commentary on the current situation, political situation. So this is theater. This is, this is something which is interactive. So this
Hmm.
Narad and his two sidekicks will give you the local flavor of the local politics and whatever is happening around you. So it's a kind of repartee and give and take, which is completely missing from
Hmm.
our own
Hmm.
Ramayana. This is a completely Indonesian thing which is done. Then we
Hmm.
must talk about definitely the Hikayat Sri Rama, which is the one
Okay.
I was telling you is the Muslim Ramayana, so to speak. Islam
Where is
came
it?
to Malaysia.
In Malaysia. Okay.
Yes. Islam came to Malaysia in the 12th century. So between the 13th
Hmm.
and the 17th century, the Hikayat Sri Ram was written. Remember how I told you, Utkarsh, that stories which are popular with the general public are used to carry whichever ideas are found, whichever ideas people want to spread. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Jainism, Buddhism, there are many Jain Ramayans and Buddhist Ramayans because this story was is very, very popular. So, all
Hmm.
religions have used it to carry their own ideas. In the Buddhist Ramayana, for example, Ram is Buddha in an earlier life. Then, these kind of differences are there. So
You,
in the
by the way, you have to. Sorry, it's a small interruption, but in Angkor Wat, what is very
yes,
interesting is the main Vishnu Murti was turned into a Buddha Murti by the king, whichever king it
ah,
was. So while
so
it's a Vishnu temple,
is it still a Buddha Murti?
yeah, yes,
Oh,
because it was done like six, seven, whatever, whenever it was built, or
oh,
a couple of hundred years after it was built.
I see, I see.
The guy
Yes,
told
these
us
things
actually.
happen. These things happen, and
Yeah.
the fact of stories being used to carry ideas, so suppose I am an Islamic preacher in 12th century 13th century Malaysia. I see that this story is very popular, so if I try to spread my values and the name of my god through this story, it's going to catch on. So that's what they did. That is why the Hekayat Shri Ram was written, and in that god becomes Allah. So instead of Vishnu, you have Allah. And you have Ram is called Seri Rama, Sita is called Siti Devi, Lakshman is called Latsamana. So these are the ways in which these little differences are there. And in the Ramayana of
I
Laos,
have to tell you something. Since you
yes,
just said Siti Devi, Siti is a very common name in Malaysia. for a girl.
See, the
Since
more
you
we
mentioned it.
talk, yeah, the more we talk, the more the number of connections we find. And
Anyways, go ahead.
in the Laos Ramayana, Lakshman is as important, if not more, than Sri Ram. So over there, the name of the Ramayana is Fralak Fraram. So Fralak is Lakshman and Fraram is Sri Ram. And our Indian Prime Minister just went there to Laos, I think about a week or 10 days ago, and there was a beautiful performance of Fralak Fraram for him. So it's a living tradition, it's not dead. And in Thailand is the Ramakien or the Ramakirti. I have read the Ramakien. It is definitely, the values are not Indian. You read it, you will make out at once that these values are not Indian. Although by and large, Utkarsh, the story remains the same. Sometimes it changes. For example, sometimes the Ravan becomes the uncle of Sri Ram, and the villain becomes someone else. Some Naga king has captured Sita Devi, and then Sri Ram goes and rescues her. So these differences are there. It's not as if Valmiki Ramayana is stuck to completely. No. People make their own different stories as they like. And, in some of them, Hanuman falls for and marries a mermaid. So that's like, for us, Hanuman is the ultimate bachelor god. But in these other stories, Hanuman weds a mermaid. This is a large and fascinating topic, never ending topic, but I'll end it with Indonesia. So in Bali, you have the Ram Kavach. And you also have that gamelan orchestra. I don't know whether you've had a chance to see it, Utkarsh, on your visits to Bali, but the gamelan orchestra has this theatrical presentation of the Ramayana. So it's the Sendratari or the Kechak dance. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it is absolutely beautifully done. Then you have the Javanese Kakavin Ramayana, and you were talking about the shadow puppets. That is the Wayang Kulit.
Yeah.
That is the Wayang
Okay.
Kulit. And there is also the
Hmm.
Wayang Bong. So,
Okay.
you see that this story has been completely owned by the places where it went. And it has taken on the flavor and structure of their country, their values. It becomes their story. Although the origin is somewhere else, but it becomes their story. I have translated the Valmiki Ramayana, and it was published in 2016. So when I was giving the speech at the launch, I remember I said that the Ramayana story is a palimpsest. Everyone writes what they want on it, and it is
Hmm.
overwritten as many times as people find new relevant things for their own lives and times. So even today's feminists who hate Ram and who hate Sita still use the story. They will still make some film called In Which Sita Sings the Blues, which is a piece of woke nonsense. However, they cannot get away from that story. So that is the hold of the Ramayana story over the human imagination, over a large, large swath of the world. And Utkarsh, this is something we'll do some other time. But what are the links between the Ramayana and the Iliad and the Odyssey?
Hmm.
So that's
It's
also a
great
very
that you said that
interesting.
because you were talking about how Ramayana, the story, has made its way to other places, and we were talking mostly about Asia.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, what about Europe?
Yes, yes.
And I guess
And
that is going to
since
be,
another episode, because it's too much to
yeah.
put in over here. And flavor of our season is nowadays Asia, isn't it? We want to focus on
Hmm.
Asia. But however, it's a very very fascinating topic. So we also have the Bad Kaha, which I keep mentioning, and the Bad Kaha, which is say 6th century Indian story or even older. You find it in the 10th century Decameron in Italy. Then you find it in As You Like It in Shakespeare.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the stories and the path that they have traced is absolutely fascinating. It is connected with trade routes, it's connected with exchange of knowledge, it's connected with exchange of culture, and it brings to life many connections which we seem to have forgotten today.
Yeah, I guess we keep coming up with new topics. We now just need to catch up on them.
Yes, we tell each other we're going to do an episode on this and then we don't. But we
Yeah,
have actually, we did do that episode on Bodhi Dharma, remember? That was
we
also
did, we did,
an
we
offshoot.
did.
We have done
Yeah.
some, but again,
Hmm.
like we keep reiterating, we're a two-person show.
Hmm.
So we have our limitations, but we'll still bring you all the most exciting things that you want. And please keep telling us what you want.
Yeah.
Keep
Please
telling
keep
us what
providing
is
feedback.
interesting.
Keep liking, keep subscribing. Uh,
Yes.
Hopefully, we are past 30K at this point. I can't see it right now, but we will. Hopefully,
Yes,
help
I
us get
hope
to
so.
40K now.
Yeah, yes. And do watch this episode while or after. I think we're going to release this after Diwali. So I hope you've had a great Diwali. And remember all these stories, all our heroes and heroines. Don't forget Satyabhama. She was the one who killed Narkasur. So don't forget the divine heroes and heroines whose examples we are to follow. And we must remember all the itihas that has gone before. Our festivals, apart from being auspicious occasions, are also times to remember our past and to celebrate the great things that have happened. So do that this Diwali.
Great. Shall we end it here?
Yes. We'll see you again next time with something which is even more interesting than this, I hope. So, namaste from me.
Take care.